Hey, Michael, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm electrical engineer background. I'm currently doing my MBA at the moment. I started in automation distribution, more robotics controls, things like that, and then led towards fluid power. And then from there, I ended up working at a manufacturer and left and ended up coming to a company called Weidmuller, which is a leader in the industry in its space, which is cabinet products, process, controls, and automation.
Cool. And why sales? Why not stay an engineer or be an engineer?
It's a very good question. So engineering is very, I'm going to say, somewhat robotic. Sales is, it allows you to go in different aspects of the business itself. And engineering is very tunnel, if that makes sense.
Sure
Where
does.
sales, you need to learn multiple aspects, not just engineering. You've got to understand business. You've got to understand people. There's many factors into sales, and it's a challenge on a daily basis. Not that engineering isn't, because engineering is in its own right, but sales is different challenges. And I think whether you want to call it a business person or a career, you've got to learn a lot more to do sales than you do engineering.
Yeah.
And so it's an ongoing process.
What was that transition like? Because you probably didn't get any exposure to that in school. You go out into the real world and were you not bored is probably not the right word, not challenged or not stimulated enough being an engineer? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's so when I started my career, actually it was my professor that had brought me on board to his company right away. And it was really a combination of engineering and sales, but more sales. And, I always say in every company, whether you're an engineer, a salesperson, we're all sales in a sense. And so it really started off at sales, and I led towards sales more. And I think it's a personality trait, to be honest. There's some engineers, as you know, and I think a lot of people will contest to this, that simply can't be sales. Right. They're an engineer, and let's be honest, that they cannot be in sales, whether it's the DNA is not there or they just simply don't want to deal with people, whatever the case may be. I always like to deal with people. It made the day more interesting. And frankly, the competitiveness, I like the fact of winning per se. And I like the fact of trying to figure out, what makes that person tick and how can I help them better than the next person, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I don't think people talk enough about it, because a lot of people got into sales just for that characteristic, that variety.
Yep.
The stimulation that every day is a little bit different, and get away from the desk sometimes, just talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, it's funny you say that, because I think the majority of salespeople I know, and I'm talking good salespeople, like there's obviously an array of different salespeople, but the ones that I've worked with that are very good, it's been that reason. It's not as if their destiny was sales or, they went to school and they said, I want to do sales. It was a founded type of situation, and they found that this is why they do it. It's breaks up the monotony of the office, right? It's a competitive spirit out there, right? I think all salespeople have that, and it's interesting. I guess that's the best word I could use. It's interesting every day. Right?
Yeah, because it has a lot of that engineering challenge to try and understand how to solve this particular situation.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a question of what you're doing. I mean, our company is very solution based. So, you have to have a much higher technical capability, let's say, than if you're working at a company that sells boxes or sells day-to-day commodity product, for example. So you still have that element. So if you're passionate about engineering, not even engineering, if you're passionate about creating solutions in general, that element's always there as well. So you don't lose that, but you add the sales component to it, which is fun, right?
Yeah. And how did you learn all the pieces of the sale? Because if you're not in sales at the beginning, or you haven't been exposed to it, you think it's, dress nice, show up, practice your presentation, give it flawlessly, give a proposal, and then close, right? Is that how it worked?
No, I would say no. I mean, I think I'm going to say, so I view it in two ways. There's two types of salespeople. There's the regurgitator and there's the creator. And I think the majority, I don't mean this demeaningly, I think the majority are regurgitators, meaning, they follow a system that they've heard, or they follow a system that they've been taught. And that's exactly to your point, right? Dress well, do this, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think that breeds success to a point. But then you become the average salesperson, right? That's out there. And then there's the creator that really comes up with the system that works for them. And remember, everybody's personality is different. So the way they come across, the way they approach things has to be different as well. And I think the fundamental core to sales is very simple. That is, if you genuinely want to help the customer, you'll take the right process if that mindset is there. I think a lot of sales mindset is, here's the process I got to follow because I need to get the sale.
Yes.
But if you really walk in genuinely wanting to help the customer and figure it out, the process is automatic.
Yeah.
Right? If that makes sense. Yeah.
It does make sense, but it's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. Fair enough. Yep.
Which almost all of sales is, certainly on the complex sales side.
Yep. I would agree.
How did you come to that conclusion? Was that just your nature, or did someone tell you, or did you just figure it out?
I think in any career, mentorship is important, right? And I'm a big believer that whoever you surround yourself with, it's either going to make you better, or it's going to make you worse, right? And I think my career has accelerated not because of my ability. I think everyone has an ability, depending on if they have to work harder or work less. Talent plays a big role, but I've had a lot of good mentors in my career so far, and I'm talking, you can either mentor yourself or get mentored by the average salesperson, the average leader, and I think you'll become that because that's what you know. I also think it contributed by the companies I worked with as well. It's a diverse type of companies, and that helped me see different perspectives, different ways of doing business, things like that. And then finally, I think the biggest thing is I love the job. Yeah, I really do. I genuinely like to get up every morning and do it. It's motivating. So I don't get up thinking, I got to get a paycheck today, so I better go do something. I genuinely love to get up and do it. Right. And I think those three things are a core factor to, accelerating your career, but also making sure that, you do well in it as well. Like, success is rated different ways. And I think in sales, many people can make money. That's kind of the easy part. The hard part is making money, but also loving what you're doing at the same time.
And when you say, there's pretty strong words, like when you get up, what are you thinking about? Is it beating the competition? Is it making a deal bigger and faster? Is it?
Yeah, I would say I'm an extremely competitive person. People that know me, I'm very competitive, and not to a point where I'm trying to beat somebody down. Right? That's not. There's a certain line, but I always say, and I have friends in the industry. When we go out for a beer, we're best friends. But as soon as work starts, you're my competitor, right? And what I mean by that is that I'm there to support my company that I work for, and I'm there to win, quite frankly, right? And I think when I say win, I don't mean just take the sale from you. What I mean is I want that customer to know that I've given him or them something better than you could. And that's the competitive spirit. And I think you have to have that. And best salespeople I know, for example, played sports, right? Some of the best I've hired played sports. And the reason for that, not because they have a better talent, they've just had that competitiveness through their career in general. And so it's bred with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I think humans or mammals in general are competitive. And I think in sales, some people can take it the wrong way, but it's really the emotional attachment to winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's even better when the win is, hopefully it's helping the customer as well. It's the right product and the intelligence to know that if it's not the right product, I'm going to go find somebody where it is the right product and match for them.
Well, I think that's the key right there. And that is, I've seen salespeople where winning is all the end and be all.
Right. It's not the.
Yeah. Well, and that you can see through that very quickly. Right. Yes. And unfortunately it becomes disingenuous, right? And I think customers see that as well. Now, winning with a balance of ensuring that you truly want to help the customer, that's a different story, right? And the key is that's the difference between becoming resourceful as you said, trying to figure out what product's best and doing what's best for the customer in general and wanting to win, opposed to just wanting to win. Because when you just want to win, you're going to shove that product down the customer's throat, trying to get them to buy whatever you can.
Yeah.
Right.
And where does the competitiveness come from? Was it a childhood thing, or were you
It's
like,
a combination. So I have a twin brother,
oh boy,
which I think it started there. And my father was a boxer, actually. So, when we were kids, if we were to fight, for example, my dad would say, put on the gloves. If you want to fight, come in the ring. Right. And so it started there. And I'm talking 4 or 5 years old. Right. And so my brother and I would go in the ring and put on the gloves and box. And then I've played, junior hockey. I played soccer all my life. I've just been in many different competitive situations. And I think growing up too, we grew up, quite frankly, my parents were immigrants to Canada. So we grew up pretty poor. So we grinded every day, right? It was something that we grinded every day. I don't want to say we hustled every day, but in a sense we did.
yeah.
Right. And so it started very young, and as we were born, and it was a kind of a hustle since today. So, right.
And why the double E? Because that seems a little out of character.
So what's right?
Why the double E as a major? Electrical engineering.
So it was actually more towards friends of mine that did the same.
Really?
Right. And so, yeah, it wasn't, I'll be quite frank, engineering in general, I think is pretty plain. Right. It is. And, I'm more of a guy that likes certain excitement, adventure, and things like that. And, when you're going into school, you don't, I would say not everybody, but a lot of people don't really know what career path to take. And a lot of my friends were taking this career path. And so I thought, let's try that out. But somewhat in my head, I always knew that I was going to do something towards sales. It was just something that was embedded in me, right? And whether it would be engineering, whether it would have been something else towards sales, pharmaceutical, who knows? I know that I would have ended up somewhere in that line. It just engineering was the starting point.
And how about the creativity? I can see that the competitiveness gives you the energy to be creative, but a lot of people, creativity is a real energy burner.
It can be if, that's a tough one to answer. Now I got to wrap my head around that, but it is a burner. I agree with that. But it also keeps it interesting, right? I mean, I'd say creativity comes with passion. Talent creates the ability to succeed is one part of it, right? But to keep things interesting on a day to day, and I mean, in sales, I would say the negatives outweigh the positives on a day to day, because you're getting rejected much more than you're getting accepted.
Yeah.
And so you've got to keep yourself motivated. And I think one of the biggest challenges with salespeople is keeping themselves motivated, right? I mean, there's a sales manager, there's sales leaders and so on that help you do that. But initially, 90% of yourself has to keep yourself motivated. And I think the creativity side helps with that, because it allows you to go outside of that box, that bubble, right? That keeps it interesting. And I think that's a big motivation factor for me anyways. And it's also allows you to search for bigger challenges. And I'm a big believer that if 100 salespeople could do this, then I'm not that interested.
Right.
I want to look at what the majority of salespeople couldn't do. And that's where I think creativity plays a big role as well, as you look towards that, right?
Yeah, because I think it is a key differentiator in sales talent.
Yep.
Because you rarely find a great salesperson who works within the box.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. That separates themselves from the crowd in a sense. Yeah, I agree.
They're willing to take little risks, push a little harder.
Yep.
Do things that might seem a little edgy sometimes.
Well, it's funny you say that. We had I interviewed a gentleman the other day, and for one of our territories that we're hiring for, and we had about 7 interviews, I believe, and the first 6 were pretty straightforward. Same questions answered, same type of answers, right? I push for my targets. I do this, yada yada. And then the 7th one came in, and the answers were completely different. And I don't know if it was on purpose for shock value. I wasn't sure, but it intrigued me. And I'll be honest, some of his answers I thought were way out to lunch, and I thought that's not going to work. But he intrigued. I hired him. I hired him on the spot. And the reason for that was he was completely different than the rest. So he wasn't in this bubble, which means that he's willing to risk things. He's willing to do things differently. And I'm a big believer. If you fail 10 times, it's because you're working. If you never fail, it's because you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right. And this gentleman, at least he was willing to fail. And that was key for me. And he was willing to try new things, whether right or wrong. At least he was open to that. And that intrigued me. So to your point, I think it's important that salespeople get out of that, right, and not stay within that tunnel.
Yeah, especially when you're selling, not well-known things into not well-known companies.
Yep.
Where people don't recognize the brand or the problem or the product, and it's your job to open their minds up to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
And what else did you learn along the way that really accelerated your career?
I would say this is the most important one, and that is, I've met a lot of people during my career so far, and what I've learned is you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. You're only as good as your team, right? And I mean, I've seen a lot of great talent out there. So some people that are, whether they're a president, whether they're a sales manager, whatever it may be, and the one fundamental difference that I've seen is that the ones that, whether you have great talent or not, it's somewhat irrelevant. And I would say if you surround yourself with the right team, the right core leadership team, or the right core salespeople, whatever it may be, that accelerates your career. And anybody that has this assumption that they're good enough to do it on their own, or that they're above everybody else, they may accelerate their career, but they don't realize that stops. And without surrounding yourself with the right people, you're not going to accelerate to what you could, right? And I realized that very early, that I'm only as good as my team. Simple as that.
Yeah. And why did you decide to get into leadership?
I don't know that it was a decision, to be honest. So it was kind of an automatic thing. I remember at my first place, S&S, it kind of just developed, right? And I was a little nervous at the time, to be honest, because I was always a believer that, how many great salespeople assume they can be a sales manager? And it's not the case, right?
It's a very different job.
It's a completely different job, but it's an assumption, right? It's an assumption that, I do so well, I can be a sales manager. That's not true. It's a completely different job. So, but that's kind of what happened at that place. Is I was doing well. The sales manager left, and they said, "You know what, Mike, I want to put you in sales management." And of course, I took the opportunity. I thought I'd like to jump in full force, but it was a completely different job. It was a wake up call for me.
Yeah.
But I also liked it, and part of that reason is that I found doing the job and mentorship goes hand in hand, and it was a gratifying situation for me too. So it started there, anyways, and then it just led from there. And it wasn't something that I set course on. It's just something that kind of happened as I grew my career.
And what kind of surprises did you have? Since it is a completely different job, people typically make the classic mistakes of hiring identical people to yourself, trying to hijack the deals at the end of the quarter, not knowing how to coach versus personal train.
Well, it's true. To your point, I think the biggest mistake first of all, you got to separate managers and leaders. And I think most people that become managers, they have this idea of what a manager is. I'm not a believer in managers. I don't like the term. I don't like the title, and I don't like the description per se. And I always say that, if you're not adding value to your team, you're just an expense in a sense. And that to me is a manager.
Yeah.
Now, a leader is a different component. A leader actually accelerates their team's success. But some of the challenges going up was you have to recognize, people's personalities, and the approach to them is different. Where I think a lot of people have this one way of approaching, and you see that because, half your team you rub the right way, half your team you rub the wrong way, but yet you're doing the same thing, and you can't understand why there's a different result. Well, 99% of the time it's because the personalities are different and they're taking things a different way, right? And I think that's a big component of it. also, you got to have a good eye for talent. I mean, I think that's the most important because, I see this in many companies. The buck stops with you. If you hire somebody, they don't work out. It's your responsibility. And I think a lot of managers look at it, well, this person didn't do their job. This is why my numbers aren't there, or whatever the case may be. And my answer to that is, that's on you. You made the judgment call to hire them. Now, there's nothing wrong with making that mistake, but it's on you to rectify that mistake, if that makes sense. And so I think those are the two biggest things I've learned, is that you got to take responsibility and accountability. The buck stops with you if you're the leader, right? And most importantly, you got to take responsibility for your team as well. That doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable, but in the face of everything else, you're the face, and you've got to make sure that you take ownership, right? So
was that a big adjustment for you? Because certainly on the competitiveness side, it's hard to channel that through other people, right? Because
yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And I don't know that it was hard. I mean, so when I played junior hockey, I was a goalie, and I kind of look at the goalie as, I don't want to say the leadership, obviously as a captain of the team, but the buck stopped at the goalie. Right. And so it was kind of the same concept for me. Right. And the goalie was kind of the last line of defense. At the end of the day, the team could play very bad, but it doesn't mean the goalie can't save the team in a sense. And I think that's somewhat like leadership in a sense. And that's, you could be a motivator, you could be a good mentor, you can be all those things. But at the end, if you don't support your team in the right way and you don't back them up in the right way, well, then that respect is lost. And without that, the team only does the minimum for you.
yes.
Right. And so I think and I don't know that it was, I guess it was learned over experience, of course. But I think it was just a natural thing as well as I grew in my career.
And you're one of the few people that's used that word, but it is so appropriate, respect.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, oh, you have their back. That's different than respect. It's a little bit different.
I agree. I think having your back is almost an obligation.
Yeah.
Right. It's something that you feel like you have to do because you're at the same company or it's a team member. But respect goes a lot further.
It does.
Right? And regardless of title means nothing to me. I think title is just a form of, it's a certain hierarchy that you have to follow within a puzzle. But from a standpoint of respect, it means absolutely nothing. Right. And I try to teach my team, there's no, for anybody to assume that you have to respect me more than I respect you. But that's a problem.
That is
right. And that's a mindset problem as well, and a company culture problem. Right. But there's a lot of companies like that. There's a lot of companies I've seen that where, the top leadership has this assumption that, I'm to be respected much more than anybody else on the floor. And that's a very bad mentality, And that's a very bad culture as well in the company. And we try to promote the fact that there's no hierarchy. There's no, everybody's at the same level. You just happen to have a different piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
That's
a great point. What did you typically see as a blocking point in most reps, evolution as a sales rep, where maybe they had the potential to be an A player, but they were stuck as a B player?
I think self-motivation is difficult for sure. I think a lot of, and it comes down to commitment. I mean, I think there's a lot of very talented people and there's a lot of very, very motivated, ambitious people. But the downfall is commitment, right? I mean, when you're starting your career in sales, it's inevitable that you're going to get shut down way more than you succeed. And I think commitment is a huge component, not just in sales, but in your career in general, right? Whatever you're going to do, whether it's sports or whatever the case may be. But I think a lot of people get burnt out quick on the negativity side. Yeah. And they have this assumption, it's not for me because I'm not good at it, because I haven't succeeded or whatever the case may be. Or they simply just don't like the fact that they're failing constantly. But what they don't realize is that failing is not a negative. Failing is a positive because you're going to learn from it, right? The next call is going to be better, et cetera, et cetera. And I think so commitment is the biggest thing. People talk a big game. I'm going to blow it out of the water. I'm going to sell everything. But you really see the proof of the pudding when you see people truly committed to the craft, right? And I would say that's 10% of the salespeople out there.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one part, and then burnout. working smart instead of working hard. And most salespeople work hard, not necessarily smart.
Yeah. And have many reps come to you looking for feedback? I mean, real feedback, where you tell them what you know is going to hurt their feelings, but will change their life.
Yeah, and part of the so I've been lucky in my career, I would say, that over the course of the companies I've been to, I've had quite a following, I guess you could say. And what I mean by that is I've had numerous employees follow wherever I go. And so, one of the hardest things to do is hire good talent. And I'm going to say lucky in my career that, I've been able to create a network and a pool of very talented people that I've gained the respect for, and they've gained the respect for me. And they've been, wherever I go, I can utilize their talents and bring them on board. And it's been that relationship for 15 years now, and that's been growing. And I think part of the reason for that is that people that know me, I don't really sugarcoat anything. I don't combine emotion with business. There's a balance of empathy. You have to have this. But when it comes to business, some people will say, well, don't say that, you're going to hurt their feelings, or whatever the case may be. And my answer to that is that, you're creating a scenario of convenience for yourself. Because if you truly want to help that person, you're going to be as upfront as you possibly can. And it may hurt their feelings initially. They may get defensive initially, but I can guarantee you long-term, it's only going to help them. So if your goal is to truly help somebody, then don't make it emotionally convenient for you, if that makes sense, right?
It does.
Yeah. And so I think I've gained a lot of respect from my peers based on that. And there's people that are coming with me because they realize that this is not a self-agented, promotion for me. This is not a discussion to promote myself. This is truly to help them. Yeah. And it's not, and they know that I'm going to be straight with them, whether they like it or not, but it has helped them. Right. And so it's, so I'm a big believer in just putting it on the table. That doesn't mean I'm always right, but at least it's on the table.
Well, that's it, because a lot of people who didn't grow up in sports or in any situation where there's a coach and team members with this peer pressure on the common objective of winning, aren't used to taking real feedback.
Constructive criticism in a sense.
On personality flaws. Let's face it, 99% of the salespeople would do better if someone told them, talk less.
Right? Absolutely. Yep. You're right. I know. It's true.
Including me sometimes.
But you're right. And that's a small comment, but it's probably the most relevant comment. And yet people have a real hard time doing it. But I think that's a consequence of the wrong leaders. And this is where you have managers and leaders. And I always say real leaders can have tough discussions. They can make tough decisions, but that's very rare in our industry anyways. I mean, I think that's rare in corporate industry, period. I think it's rare. And you have many managers that have the title, but there's not many leaders. And I mean real leaders. And when I say a real leader, you've got that respect. You can have the tough discussion and you can make the tough decisions when most people can't. Yep. Right. And it's a small discussion, like you just said, simply talk less. It may sound rude. It may sound a little harsh. It may sound abrupt, but it's a necessary discussion.
It is.
Right? Yeah.
And they'll naturally rationalize, well, they were interested in what I said.
Yeah. To
a certain extent they were.
Yeah. Your perception.
You passed that about an hour ago.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And and when you say that, I respect people like that because you're truly trying to help them. Yeah. It shows you immediately that you're not trying to satisfy your own agenda, because there's nothing there that satisfies your agenda. Right. And so the only outcome of that is to truly help them. Whether they take that as real advice and allow themselves to learn, that's up to them. Yeah. But at least you've given them the tool to do so. Right. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, Michael, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
So Michael Daly, LinkedIn, and I don't have much social media. LinkedIn's my only, and that's what I stick to. And then, Weidmuller.com, which is the company that I'm with. And it's a great company. It's both US, Canada, worldwide company. And, Weidmuller.com, it'll show you everything that you need to know. And hiring wise, we are hiring like crazy right now. So by all means, send me an email on LinkedIn. I'm talking salespeople, engineers, inside salespeople, administration, technical applications, you name it, we're hiring. So send me some information if you want.